Oh, my Final Fantasy fans, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but Magic the Gathering's Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender may just be Universes Beyond's greatest standard set yet. And though personally I would prefer to live in a universe without any Universes Beyond sets at all, that is not the universe we live in. In this universe, Universes Beyond sets are a given. The only variable is how successfully Magic game designers are able to integrate the outside IPs into their game. And in this universe, I would take 100 Avatar: The Last Airbenders before I took a single Marvel's The Spider-Man. The best Universes Beyond sets, Lord of the Rings, Final Fantasy, and now Avatar, take the lore and character design from a completely different story and translate those elements into Magic mechanics through the art of game design. I don't use the word art lightly here. I really do feel that the most brilliant Universes Beyond designs are akin to works of art. When designing an in-universe card, there is a lot more freedom as to what mechanics you give it. The card will need some amount of lore, but the lore is less defined and clearly less widely known. You have some wiggle room with it. With Universes Beyond, you're taking characters that many Magic the Gathering players are already familiar with, and you have to depict them within the mechanics of the game. This is an exceedingly difficult challenge, one that pretty much only the expert game designers at Wizards of the Coast could pull off as consistently as they do. And if a brilliant Universes Beyond design is a work of art, then Magic's Avatar: The Last Airbender set is like the Guggenheim. Now don't get me wrong, there are some duds scattered amongst the bunch, but compared to a set like Spider-Man, this set is packed full of breathtaking exercises in Universes Beyond design. But there is one problem that I want to talk about today. There's too many freaking legendary creatures in this set. There are, and I counted twice, 69 legendary creatures in the Avatar: The Last Airbender main set. 69. And while yes, Spider-Man still had more legendary creatures, and yes, Spider-Man still had a smaller overall set, making that significantly worse, it's still too many Aangs, alright? What do we need this many Aangs for? With Spider-Man, I made a video in which I placed every single Spider-Man design on a tier list based solely on the success of the translation from Spider Comic to Magic card. This was an exercise in self-flagellation, a penance I felt I had to pay for how long I spent staring at the complete card list for one of Magic's worst sets of all time. With Avatar, I wanted to do something similar and yet a little different because this isn't the same problem as Spider-Man, and there's some really cool designs here that I want to discuss. So what I did was I looked at every legendary that had multiple copies, too many copies, and ranked them on our tier list. By that criteria, there's 14 characters in total, represented over 36 cards. So we're gonna grade all the Aangs, all the Sokkas, all the Tophs, all the Korras, all the Kataras, all the Zukos, all of them. And thus, presented here is the official Tolarian Community College Magic the Gathering Avatar: The Last Airbender Legendary Card Design Tier List. Now, I did have to omit a few legendaries. I'm so sorry, we're not doing the Cabbage Merchant. We're just looking at the multiple legendary cards that were given for various characters. That also means we're excluding sagas, but I know everyone's gonna be real upset that we didn't grade the Cabbage Merchant guy. He's S tier, okay? I'll just go ahead and say it. He's S tier. And he got a whole secret layer. He got a whole secret layer around him. Maybe you couldn't bear to stand in line for it, but it was there. But yeah, it does suck to miss a secret layer, which is why I'm going into the vault and giving away 30 of them. 30 secret layers this Friday on my Whatnot stream. Classic ones, new and old, and they're all coming from me to you on Whatnot. Including but not limited to the X-Men comic book series secret layer. Sonic the Hedgehog, the Sega video game series secret layer. The Last of Us, that TV show I caught one night, secret layer. Iron Man starring Doctor Doom, Sonic the Hedgehog again, and Lara Croft Tomb Raider, but a boy. Hatsune Miku, She's dancing the gritty, yo. And many more, because I'm giving away 30 old secret layers on my Whatnot stream. Tune in. Whatnot is just like if eBay and Twitch had a baby. People such as myself are able to stream themselves selling cool Magic the Gathering items, and you can hang out and chat with us while we sell them. Create a brand new account, and you also get a $15 credit towards any items in any store, so that's $15 of Magic stuff, and you get that just by creating an account. Or you get a secret layer, because I'm giving away 30 of them from throughout this year's history and a little before it and whatever. It's 30 secret layers from the vault. Secret layers. You got a secret layer. You got a secret layer. You remember that? You remember that meme? So join me this Friday on Whatnot, because Wizards of the Coast might have canceled the Monster Hunter secret layer, but we are going to make up for it by giving away 30 from me to you, courtesy of Whatnot. Now, before we talk about the characters of Avatar, I want to also rank the 4 bending mechanics by the same criteria by which I'll soon rank the legends. The worst of the 4, in my opinion, is water bending. Here's my read on what they were going for. To water bend, you transfer energy from one source to another. When you tap permanents to water bend, you're pulling from their energy. But while I do understand this, I don't think this mechanic is quite as evocative of some of the others. Now, I'm not giving this mechanic a failing grade by any means, but it is a tier lower than the rest in my opinion. I'll give it a B. Next, we have earthbending. This certainly is an evocative design. You're bringing your lands to life for use in combat. But if I'm going to nitpick, and the whole point of this video and kind of this channel is to nitpick, I'd argue that the earth you bend doesn't become a creature. But making it into a creature is probably the only way to make this mechanic powerful enough to work in Magic. So I'm still giving it an A. Airbending, I'll also give an A. The mechanic does a great job depicting the defensive and buoyant nature of the element. You can't permanently remove something by airbending it, but you can deflect it, disorient it, and generally take advantage of the tempo that your nimbleness provides. You can also airbend yourself to pull yourself out of the fray. I'm only giving this mechanic an A instead of an S because it's missing a certain elegance that I associate with S-tier designs. Most notably in that paying 2 to recast this thing that's been airbent is a purely Magic-centered mechanic. It doesn't translate to anything in the show. Firebending, on the other hand, is the creme de la creme. This is an S-tier mechanic, if ever I've seen one. Combat-oriented, fantastic for pressing an advantage, awkward to use on defense, and incredibly flexible. Your firebending can help you cast interaction, combat tricks, instant speed card draw, or anything else. The designers really nailed it on this one. All right, we're on to the main event, the Avatar design tier list. Remember, there are over 60 legendaries in the main Avatar set, so I'm not going to be ranking every single one of them here. Instead, I'm focusing only on the characters who are significant enough to the plot of the show to receive multiple cards and ranking each of those. But that's not to say there aren't also notable designs among the minor characters. To prove that, I'm going to illustrate what I'm envisioning for each tier of the list by using an example from among the minor characters for each. At F tier, we will have cards like High Bai, a Spirit of Balance. The card feels like the designers said, okay, so High Bai is a panda. That means it has to be a black-white creature, and that means we're going to have to give it the black-white mechanics. This card represents to me true F-tier design. At D tier, we will have cards like Gran Gran. I know, we all love Gran Gran, but her card design is totally incoherent. My most generous interpretation is that she's a teacher and that she is resourceful, making the most of limited resources to survive the harsh Arctic environment. But if I have to hear another Magic the Gathering player say, I gotta kill Gran Gran before she gets turned on one more time, I'm going to stick ice picks in my ears. At C tier, we will have cards like Long Fong, Grand Secretariat. Long Fong is really more of a Dimir character than a Golgari one, and his design should have more to do with manipulation and misinformation rather than a payoff for sacrifice synergies. Unlike High Bai, though, Long Fong does at least have a little relation to sacrifice, as his actions do sacrifice the good of the Earth Kingdom for the Dai Li's benefit. But that's not the main thing I think about when I think about that character. At B tier, we will have cards like Jet Freedom Fighter. Jet is a fan favorite character, charismatic, brave, and possessing a strong moral compass. He's not afraid to use violence to liberate his people, so his enter the battlefield effect is right on the money. His death trigger could be interpreted as motivating Smellerbee and Longshot to continue their revolutionary ways. This is a solid card design, but it's not quite as evocative or distinct as most A tier designs. So what do we have at the A tier? Well, cards like Combustion Man are exactly what I think about when I think about a unique and flavorful design. Combustion Man is powerful. He's inevitable, but he's also beatable if you can outrun him. In other words, if you can afford to keep taking damage instead of letting him kill your permanent, you can totally ignore him. But if you slip up, you won't be able to keep taking damage, and he will start to pick off your best permanents one by one. Excellent design. Then at S tier, we will have cards such as one of my favorite designs of the set, Professor Zhao, Anthropologist. Discarding a card to draw a card is a magic mechanic colloquially known as rummaging. Professor Zhao has 0 combat abilities. His entire purpose is to literally rummage through your library until he sacrifices himself to spend eternity with lost knowledge. This is an S tier design without question. All right, let's get into it. 14 characters, 36 cards, one perfectly executed tier list. What better place to start than with Aang, the main protagonist of the show? Aang has a good heart and a strong sense of moral duty. He's always there for his friends, and he continues to grow stronger the more elements he learns to master. Our first Aang card is Aang, Last Airbender. This Aang has a straightforward ETB airbending ability and gains life whenever he learns a lesson. This makes sense as this Aang depicts him at the start of his journey when he's only an airbender and has a lot to learn. Nothing special here, but a solid uncommon early story legend design. Solid B. Moving forward in the story, we have Aang, Swift Savior. This card depicts Aang toward the end of Book 1, Water. The front side represents Aang's growing mastery of both air and waterbending, and his growing experience as a hero. The backside represents the end of the Siege of the North Part 2, where he fuses with the Ocean Spirit and devastates the attacking Fire Nation army. Fantastic design. S tier. Next up is Aang at the Crossroads. By this point, you should notice that each Aang card has one more color than the last. Aang at the Crossroads depicts the end of Book 2, Earth, the Crossroads of Destiny. He's mastered earthbending, which is reflected in his mana cost. When he enters, he gets a creature from your deck, freeing his allies from Dali prison. He enters the Avatar state when his friends are in grave danger. This card nails it. S tier. Our last Aang card attempts to capture the climax of the show, Aang's duel with Phoenix King Ozai. I understand what they're going for here. Aang has learned firebending and is now a 4-color card. Once you bend all 4 elements, he transforms into his final and most powerful form. This is a pretty good design, but I'm not blown away. It just doesn't really feel like the definitive Avatar design. I wish they would have found a way to give him all 4 elemental bending abilities on this card itself, rather than just drawing from the bending happening around him. To be honest, I think depicting Avatar Aang at his full power on a card might be an impossible task, kind of like trying to depict Urza at the height of his power, something Magic designers struggled to do for years, outside of an unset anyway, until they finally realized Urza would need to be depicted with 2 cards via a meld. I'm not saying meld should have returned for Avatar, but I am saying that depicting Aang at the full height of his Avatar powers is definitely reminiscent to me of depicting Urza as a planeswalker. Our next character is Katara, depicted on 3 cards in the main set. Katara believes in Aang more than anyone. She's kind-hearted, she's inspiring, and she's a powerful bender in her own right. But how well is that represented on the cards? Katara's first card is Katara, Waterbending Prodigy. Katara is a naturally gifted waterbender, and she also gets stronger whenever you waterbend with her, or use her to attack. In other words, as she gains more experience. The flavor text is a line from her duel with Master Paku, a key Katara moment in Book 1. This is an excellent uncommon legend design. Solid A. The second Katara card is Katara, Water Tribe's Hope. Katara's waterbending improves proves the strength of your team, and can be used both on the offense and defensively against damage. And she brings a friend with her when she enters. This is a perfectly fine design, but nothing special. I'm giving her a B. Our last Katara card is Katara the Fearless. This Katara makes her friends more powerful, accurate, but not particularly exceptional. There's just so much more to Katara in her final form than that. At least let her have a waterbending ability. It's a perfectly good card design in a vacuum, but Universes Beyond designs aren't in a vacuum. This feels bottom up, not top down. I fear Katara the Fearless gets a C. Sokka, like the rest of the main cast, also gets 3 cards. Sokka begins the show mostly as comic relief. He is unable to bend, and therefore is not as useful in combat early on as Aang and Katara. But as the show progresses, Sokka becomes a brilliant strategist and swordsman, as important to the fight against the Fire Nation as anyone. Our first Sokka card is Sokka, Lateral Strategist. Sokka learning to use tactics to make up for not having bending was one of the main arcs of the show. The flavor text comes from his encounter with Wan Shi Tong, who despite having studied many waterbending styles, fails to stop Sokka from hitting him on the head with a book. This card serviceably depicts the way he works better in tandem with another fighter, but it's not a home run. B. Sokka Bold Boomeranger is next, and I guess discarding up to 2 cards, then drawing that many cards is kinda like throwing and catching a boomerang. Sokka does love his boomerang, but this card doesn't really depict that affinity much at all. That said, he does get stronger whenever you cast stuff, and in the words of the man himself, he does believe in the power of stuff. I'm giving this card a D, but in a set with fewer great designs, this one might look better. Sokka, Tenacious Tactician, rounds out our Sokka cards. Sokka's final form is a brilliant strategist whose battle plans give his allies a significant boost in combat. Translating that as, our power increases, we're harder to block, and our numbers grow makes perfect sense. This design lacks that X factor that pushes a card into S tier, but it's still fantastic. A. Next up is Zuko, the exiled Fire Nation prince. Zuko's storyline is the epitome of a redemption arc. Raised well by his kind-hearted mother amidst the imperial core of the Fire Nation, Zuko struggles first to live up to his harsh father's expectations, then to catch up to his maniacal sister's abilities, and finally to own up to his own wrongdoings. Zuko's story and his cards start with Zuko, Exiled Prince. Zuko's Book 1 character is a ruthless, obsessive, and powerful firebender hell-bent on capturing the Avatar. He makes all his moves from exile, so his ability makes use of cards he exiles. Kind of works, but there are better translations in the set. B. In Zuko Conflicted, we see the beginning of Zuko's character growth. In Book 2, Zuko begins his change of heart. But it takes time, and for a while, his every move only brings him more pain. This is a great depiction of this period as a lost and woe-begotten wanderer. He does a bunch of stuff at great cost, and at the last minute, he switches sides. An excellent but not brilliant design. A. In Fire Lord Zuko, we see the culmination of his story arc. When the war is over, Zuko reassumes his birthright and becomes the Fire Lord. His bending scales with the size of his team as he's learned to be a good friend. Plus, he's returned from exile, so anytime something else returns from exile, he gives your team a buff. I like this design a lot. A. Rounding out the Aang gang, we have Toph Beifong. Toph has a metaphorical and literal chip on her shoulder. Blind since birth, but possessing extraordinary earthbending talent, Toph uses her hyper-hearing and earth sense to effectively see as long as she stands on solid ground. Toph, the blind bandit, portrays the character as we meet her in the show, the reigning champion of the Earth Rumble. Toph is an earthbending prodigy who gets stronger the more access she has to the Earth. I think making her power equal to the number of lands you have in play would make a little more sense, but I do see where they're going with this design. C. Toph, hard-headed teacher, represents her teaching Aang earthbending. Aang struggled to learn earthbending, as earth is the opposite of air. Toph's teaching methods didn't click for him at first, as she was too stubborn to adapt to his needs as a student. The ETB discarding a card to reuse an instant or sorcery you cast earlier could possibly represent stubbornly attempting to teach the same lesson twice. Maybe it would be better if the returned card was limited to lessons, but it feels accurate enough to give this card a B. Last, but also first, is Toph, the first metalbender. Toph was the first earthbender to learn how to manipulate metal. Discovering the earthen elements that compromise metal does seem a lot like turning your metallic artifacts into lands that you can bend. This was a hard ability to depict mechanically, and I really like where the designers landed with it. I'm giving her an S. Next up, we look at Azula's 3 cards. Azula is the villain to end all villains. Sorry, Ozai. Evil from the beginning and never changing, her cards depict a violent, manipulative, and obsessive nature to a T. Our first Azula card is Azula on the Hunt. Azula's arc is one of a wicked sociopath on her quest to find both the Avatar and her brother Zuko. This card does a pretty good job of depicting that hunt and the pain she endured in the process. Even in her earlier form, she's still a powerful firebender. I'm giving this design an A. Azula, Cunning Usurper, depicts Azula having overthrown the Earth Kingdom from within. Azula always lies. She'll manipulate anyone to achieve her aims, as she does during the coup of Ba Sing Se. This card depicts exactly that. Azula stealing one of your opponent's creatures out from under them. This gets an A. The end of Azula's story is shown on Fire Lord Azula. Azula, in her final form, isn't a more powerful bender. She still firebends for 2. She isn't more powerful in general, really, either. She still has 4 power, but her mastery of bending is awe-inspiring. She unleashes a flurry of moves each combat that will keep your opponent or opponents on the back foot. The choosing of a new target on the copied spell could also represent her targeting Katara during the last Agni Kai. S-tier design. The last of the main characters we're looking at is Iroh. Iroh is an exceptional firebender, but he's put his days of military dominance behind him. Now he prefers the simple life, drinking tea and mentoring his beloved nephew Zuko. Aside from Zuko's mother, Iroh is the only character who sees Zuko's good heart from the very beginning. Uncle Iroh is a beloved character by many. Charming, still powerful, but more fragile than he was at top combat form, hence the 2 toughness. Still, he's always eager to teach a lesson. This design is nothing special, but it's solid. B. Iroh Tea Master depicts Iroh as the owner of the Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop. Here he's handing out tea and building a strong community. There's nothing Iroh loves more than winning over a friend with tea. What a friendly guy. Easy A. Iroh Grand Lotus, on the other hand, depicts a more fearsome side of the character. Iroh returning to form as a brilliant general, making amends for his military failure as that cost him his son, and turning lessons from his past into useful moves in the present. His color identity shows the way he's leading the White Lotus, older benders who cross political lines of the kingdoms of Earth, Water, and Fire. Brilliant design. S. And that's the last of the main characters in the set. Now, I'm not saying that the rest of the characters on this list aren't as important. I'm sure that for many of you, these next few characters include some of your favorites. I'm just saying that it must be Wizards of the Coast who thinks they're less important, because they only have 2 cards each. First of the minor characters is Appa. This sky bison is Aang's first companion, continuing in a long tradition of partnership between the air nomads and the sky bison, who first taught the nomads airbending. He is an integral part of Team Avatar, flying them wherever they need. Card 1 is Appa, Loyal Sky Bison. This Appa helps his friends fly, and sometimes he does some airbending. And he does this over and over, when he enters and when he attacks. Good old reliable Appa, you get an A for Appa. Card 2 is Appa, Steadfast Guardian. The other thing Appa loves to do is appear out of nowhere when Team Avatar is in dire straits and airbend everyone to safety. Steadfast Guardian is the definition of evocative card design. You get an S, Appa. Next up is Momo, a flying lemur and the other animal companion in the protagonist crew. He generally has less utility to the mission than Appa does, but he's nonetheless a valued member of the team. Momo, Playful Pet, is a fine card for a fine creature. Momo the lemur bat is always running off for one reason or another, and this design does a great job showing exactly that. When he leaves the battlefield, he fetches you something or scouts for something. I really like this design. Solid A. Momo, Friendly Flyer, isn't a bad card either. Momo is always making friends with other flying critters, and cost reduction is a fine way to represent that. This design is less evocative in my opinion, but it does still track for me. I'm giving this Momo a B for Befort. Suki is our next fan favorite minor character. Suki is a powerful martial fighter, leader of the Kyoshi warriors. She's also an absolute sweetheart, never hesitating to step in whenever her help is needed. We'll start with Suki, Kyoshi warrior. Suki's uncommon design shows how powerful and inspiring she is, but also how her strength is boosted by the presence of her allies. It can be hard to pull off a clean yet evocative design with an uncommon legend, but this Suki is precisely that. Solid A. The other Suki is Suki, Courageous Rescuer. The final form of Suki doesn't work as well. I see what they were referencing, but this is a very specific moment from Book 3, Episode 21, where Suki rescues Sokka and Toph, who are falling from an airship. But there's a disconnect somewhere. Is she saving the permanents from dying? If so, why does she make a different ally appear? And why does she only buff power, not toughness? This feels like some compromises were made to the design for gameplay's sake, which is a perfectly understandable choice, but it also means that this Suki gets docked points on this particular tier list. C. Moving on, we have Mai. Mai, along with Ty Lee, is one of Azula's 2 childhood friends. If you can say Azula has ever had any friends. Mai is a skilled combatant, perpetually bored by the life of a noble, and disappointed in her enemies for not being harder to defeat. The first of the 2 Mai cards is Mai Jaded Edge. This version of Mai is not exactly a failure, but there's very little to her. I get the joke. She is living a life of relatively docile nobility until she gets activated to become a lethal combatant. I just don't think this is the most evocative way to depict her. I'll toss her a C. The second Mai card, Mai Scornful Striker, however, is a thing of beauty. A fierce and swift attacker who will strike before you even know what hit you, Mai punishes any fighter who relies on bending to win combat. That is what S tier is all about. Following Mai, we have, of course, Ty Lee. Ty Lee is a fun-loving acrobat who is also a brilliant fighter. Her strikes are precise, neutralizing her opponent's muscle control, or even temporarily disabling their bending abilities. First is Ty Lee, Artful Acrobat. This Ty Lee feels like a dancer spinning around defenders to strike them where it hurts. Perfect for the extraordinarily nimble character. I love it. Solid A. Ty Lee, Chi Blocker, manages to depict the same character as Ty Lee, but in a distinct light. Whereas the first Ty Lee feels like an acrobat fighting, this Ty Lee feels like the fighter who strikes your bicep to make your arm stop working. Also an A. Next, we have Bumi. Bumi is the only of Aang's childhood friends to still be alive after 100 years pass. He's now an old and crazy man who is nonetheless a phenomenal earthbender. Bumi, King of 3 Trials, is the first of our Bumi cards. When Bumi is first reintroduced to Aang, he sends Aang on a series of tests to prove that Aang is the Avatar. 3 tests, 3 lessons, 3 abilities. I get what they're doing with this card, but I don't think it's a good translation. Sadly, this Bumi gets a C. Bumi Unleashed shows Bumi in peak fighting form. Hard-hitting, relentless, and devastatingly hard to defend against. Bumi Unleashed is a phenomenal depiction of an all-out attacker with 100 years of experience as an earthbender. S tier all the way. Our last character is Zhao. Admiral Zhao is one of the main villains of Book 1. Ruthless and unrestrained, his obsession with capturing the Avatar dictated his every action. He was willing to sacrifice anything, including his own men, to achieve his aims. Zhao, Ruthless Admiral, does a great job of showing how willing Zhao was to stop at nothing to capture the Avatar. When your permanents are sacrificed, your whole team gets stronger, but only temporarily. The buff fades end of turn. This shows how short-sighted this kind of battle strategy is. This Zhao is a perfect A. But as good as Zhao, Ruthless Admiral is, Zhao the Moonslayer is even better. He literally creates a blood moon when he kills the moon's spirit, dubbing himself Zhao the Conqueror. This type of a reference to core magic stuff on a Universes Beyond card really hits for fans of both properties. Zhao the Moonslayer is nothing short of a slam dunk, one of the absolute best designs in the entire set. And there you have it, every major and kind of major character in Avatar ranked by the success and elegance of their card design. You'll notice that not a single one of these major characters received a failing grade for their design, and I really do believe that. While there are some duds, even the most Dudley of these cards are still a little bit grokkable, especially when you compare them to the worst of the Spider-Man designs. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of the designs in Avatar? Do you disagree with any of my evaluations, and where would you put the more minor character designs on my tier list? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, I have opened up the Secret Layer Vault to give away 30, count them, 30 secret layers this Friday on my next Whatnot stream. Tune in and walk away with one of these awesome old secret layers that are mostly based on video games, it looks like. This one's based on The Office, but this one's based on the Wolverine. Find out which secret layer may be yours this Friday on Whatnot, and everybody gets a $15 credit when they create a brand new account using my invite code at www.whatnot.com/invite/Tolarian College. $15 to spend on magic stuff, hanging out with the professor, and maybe walking away with secret layer Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a Whatnot stream this Friday with me, the professor. professor. Why don't you tune in and be there? We'll have fun. Thank you, Whatnot, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Welcome to Shuffle Up and Play. Today, Mystery Booster 2, but we will each be building a commander deck from the contents.
It's a huge set. I'm trying to remember how many cards are in it?
I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with the garbage, by the way, so I've just been
sure.
chucking it behind me.
Our highly skilled editors will love picking up Foxy's
I'm gonna
garbage.
pick it up! I'm gonna pick it up!
Play a Forest and a Mox Poison.
Oh! How did Fast Mana get into this?
Josh made the saddest face. Look at that! How am I supposed to? I hate you for 7. Untap.
Yes, you will.
Thank you so much
It
for
resolves.
allowing. I will
resolves.
draw. Okay.
It resolves.
Thanks so much.
You haven't said how's it once. You said hello in your intro.
How's it? How's it?
How's it?
Now you got it. Editors,
All
you're
right.
good? Okay.
Yeah.